Ravens fans, football fans, let me just set the stage, because this right here was the story dominating First Take this morning. I sat there watching Stephen A. Smith, Cam, Damian Woody, Molly at the desk, and you could feel the frustration, the disappointment, and the disbelief. And let me tell you, it was aimed directly at the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore walked into Highmark Stadium, the very same place where their season ended 231 days ago. And once again, they walked out broken-hearted. This time it was a Week 1 showdown, Ravens against the Buffalo Bills, Lamar Jackson against Josh Allen, and the Ravens had everything right there in front of them. They had a 15-point lead in the fourth quarter. They had the game under control. They had the chance to make a statement on national television and remind everybody that they are true contenders in the AFC, but instead, they collapsed. Stephen A. didn't mince words. He called it embarrassing. Flat out embarrassing. Cam agreed, saying that the Ravens flat out choked away a game they had no business losing. And honestly, can you argue with them? You put up 40 points on the Buffalo Bills. You score enough to win on almost every single Sunday. And yet, when the dust settled, the Ravens were the ones staring at the scoreboard in disbelief because Josh Allen, Superman himself, had snatched that victory away. Let's be real. If you're the Cleveland Browns, if you're the New York Jets, maybe people aren't surprised when you blow a 2-touchdown lead late in the game. But the Baltimore Ravens, a franchise with history, with pedigree, with a defensive culture, no way. You're not supposed to let that happen. And yet, in Buffalo, it happened. The defense couldn't get a stop when it mattered. The pass rush completely disappeared. That was one of the biggest points of emphasis on the show this morning. Everyone at the desk was saying it. How can you let Josh Allen stand back there in the pocket with all day to throw? How can you give one of the most dangerous quarterbacks in football the time to pat the ball, scan the field, and pick apart your secondary? That is a recipe for disaster, and the Ravens paid the price. Stephen A. in particular pointed to the culture of toughness and accountability that Baltimore is supposed to be built on. He said, "This isn't who they are supposed to be. You can't call yourself the Raven, wear that purple and black, and then fold in the fourth quarter like that. You can't let Josh Allen look like he's playing backyard football while your defense looks lost." And here's the painful truth. This isn't new. This is the same story we've seen before when Baltimore goes up against Buffalo. Go back to the playoff. Same thing. The Ravens couldn't generate pressure. They let Allen control the game, and it cost them dearly. Sunday night was déjà vu all over again. Now, was the offense perfect? No. Even with 40 points on the board, they stalled late, and once Derrick Henry coughed up that football, momentum completely flipped. But still, you put 40 points on the scoreboard, you expect to win that game. That should be enough. Instead, the defense crumbled, the pass rush vanished, and the secondary got exposed. And that's exactly why Stephen A. and Cam sat there looking furious this morning. They weren't just talking about one loss, they were talking about a mindset, about whether the Ravens truly have that killer instinct, that competitive culture to close the door when the moment demands it. And last night, they didn't. Let me tell you something. When we rolled into First Take this morning, the conversation didn't just stop at Josh Allen's brilliance or Baltimore's collapse. No, it went deeper. It went straight into the details, into the mistakes, into the disappointment, into the players who simply didn't show up when their team needed them most. And believe me, Stephen A. and Cam did not hold back. One of the first names that came up was Jaire Alexander. And I'll be honest, the way the panel laid into him, it was hard to argue against it. Stephen A. practically leaned over the table and said, "That was one of the worst debuts I've ever seen for a Raven. Absolutely atrocious." And Cam, with that sharp look in his eyes, nodded right along. Because what Alexander put on the field last night wasn't just below expectations, it was embarrassing. Think about it. A costly pass interference that handed Buffalo a fresh set of downs, busted coverages that allowed Keon Coleman to rip through the secondary, and then, to make matters worse, he gets burned again right after that. It was mistake after mistake, and every single one of them cost Baltimore dearly. And what did we say on the show? If he's hurt, if he's not 100%, then sit him. Because what we saw last night, that version of Jaire Alexander, isn't even better than the guys you've got waiting on the bench. That effort simply can't be tolerated. Not in Baltimore. Not on a team that has championship aspirations. But then, the discussion shifted, and you could feel the table lean forward as soon as Derrick Henry's name was brought up. And man, this one stung. Because Derrick Henry was sensational. Absolutely sensational. The numbers are ridiculous. 18 carries, 169 yards, averaging over 9 yards a touch, and 2 rushing touchdowns that looked like something straight out of a highlight reel. He was a bulldozer with speed, a freight train that Baltimore couldn't slow down. Every time he touched the football, you felt like something special was about to happen. But as brilliant as he was, there was one play, one critical mistake that changed everything. That late-game fumble, the one that swung the momentum and gave Buffalo life. It wasn't just a turnover, it was the kind of moment that echoes through a stadium, sucking the air out of one sideline and breathing life into the other. On first take, the guys couldn't stop talking about it. They broke down the timing, the field position, the shock of seeing such a dominant force suddenly cough it up. Cam, who knows the pain of costly turnovers all too well, said it himself. That fumble was the turning point. That's the one moment you can point to and say, that's where it slipped away. And he's right. It hurt, not just because it flipped the game, but because it overshadowed what was otherwise a monstrous performance by the King. And yet, even in their criticism, there was still respect, and plenty of it. Everyone on that desk, from the analysts to the former players, agreed. Derrick Henry is still that guy. He's still a freak of nature, the kind of rare talent defenses spend all week game planning for. He's still the player who can carry an offense on his back, who can break a game wide open with one cut, one stiff arm, one burst through the hole. People keep waiting for him to finally slow down, to show signs of wear, to look human. But let me tell you, it's not happening this season. What we saw last night proved that. He just needs to hold on to the football, and he knows it. That mistake eats him up more than it does any of us, because Derrick Henry has set a standard for himself that very few can ever reach. One slip doesn't erase the fact that he remains one of the most feared players in football. Finally, as the debate kept rolling, the focus shifted to the bigger picture. Damian Woody, trying to cut through all the noise, reminded everyone that this is just week 1. He was that voice of reason at the desk, pointing out that as brutal and humiliating as this collapse was, the Ravens still have 16 more games to play. In other words, the story of this season isn't finished. This doesn't have to define them, and that was the tone we left on: perspective. Yes, it's a gut punch. Yes, it's humiliating. Yes, it stings in ways only players in that locker room can truly feel. But the season is long. Baltimore still has a chance to fix things, to steady themselves, to turn this into nothing more than a bitter memory instead of a defining moment. That's the opportunity that still lies in front of them. But here's the catch. The schedule doesn't do them any favor. That was another major point hammered home at the table this morning. Because now, Baltimore doesn't just have to regroup. They have to do it against some of the toughest teams in the league. They've got Cleveland next, a division rival that always plays them tough. Then comes Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes and the defending champ. After that, Detroit, one of the hottest, most physical teams in football right now. That's a gauntlet, folks. And when you're staring down a stretch like that, you can't afford to let games like last night slip away. Every win mattered. Every slip-up gets magnified. Stephen A. said it best. You needed this one. You had to walk out of Buffalo with a win. And now? Now you're chasing. And chasing early in a season like this can put you in a hole that's tough to climb out of. And that's where we left it on First Take. Frustration, disappointment, but also a challenge. A challenge to the Ravens to prove this was just a stumble, not the start of a pattern. Because if they don't, nights like last night are going to come back to haunt them when the playoff picture comes into focus.